So you want to learn the lingo of real estate investing. Guys, welcome to the language of real estate and real estate investing. It's really confusing to hear real estate people talk sometimes, especially when you're starting out and you're new. It seems like they're speaking in like an alien language. They're like beep, beep, boop, boop, bop, bop, beep. It's like, it's really confusing. It's crazy. It's like they're speaking Klingon. But really, real estate has certain lingos that you probably need to learn when you're starting out, especially just becoming a real estate investor. The more time you spend talking to other real estate investors, you'll learn these terms. But overall, take some time to learn it. But in this video, I really want to give you a crash course on real estate lingo and real estate terms that you need to know. So before we get into it, so let's learn some real estate terms. Whoa. Before you take my class here, learning the language of real estate, you know you need to smash that like button and subscribe to help the YouTube algorithm so we can get more subscribers, so I can have more time spending helping you guys out in real estate. So I think the first term you should know is an adjustable rate mortgage. An adjustable rate mortgage basically is a mortgage that has an interest rate that basically fluctuates. So for example, maybe it's a 30-year loan and you're 1 through 20, you're at maybe a 4% interest rate. And then from 20 to 30, you're at maybe a 6%. It changes, most of the time it gets worse. So it looks really sexy in the beginning, but overall it does not end up being too well. This brings us back to a fixed rate mortgage, which is just a flat rate. Let's say 4% for 30 years. That is a flat mortgage. So when you're dealing with people that are interested in selling their properties, or you're buying a property with maybe a mortgage in place where you're actually getting a mortgage on a rental property, you need to know the difference between an ARM, adjustable rate mortgage, or a fixed rate mortgage. Now, while we're still talking about mortgages, I have to tell you the first term that embarrassingly, when I started real estate in high school, I really didn't know much about until I got into college, which is amortization. Amortization is basically the schedule of payments for a mortgage. So an actual mortgage payment, let's say $1,000, it gets scheduled up into a certain part of that's going to go to interest, and a certain part of that is going to go to principal. So let's say, for example, when you're starting out, most likely you'll spend $1,000 for your mortgage. 900 of those dollars will go to pay the interest, and then $100 will go to actually pay the actual loan on the property, which will build equity for you. So the first maybe 10 years that you're probably paying more interest than in equity. So the bank gets their money first, and then at the end of the loan, let's say the last 5 years, it's almost $900 for equity and $100 for interest. Next here is an assessed value. Assessed value is the property value that is determined by usually the city or county to see how much they're going to charge you in taxes. Some other lingo you should also know is what they call a buyer's agent. A buyer's agent, in plain terms, is just basically a realtor that is helping someone buy real estate, versus a seller's agent, which is someone who's looking to sell the real estate with a real estate agent or realtor. Another really funny one here is escrow. Took me a little bit to learn this one, embarrassingly, but escrow is basically a tiny financial account handled by a third party in a real estate transaction. The way this works is, let's say I'm looking to buy a house from John over here. So what I would do to give him a down payment and put some money into escrow, I would give him a $5,000 down payment on the rental property I'm looking to buy from him. That $5,000 doesn't go to him. It'll actually go to usually the title company, who will hold that money in escrow account, which is they keep it in that account until the transaction goes through. Maybe if I get out of it, and maybe if I back out, I can get the money back. But if it's past a certain period of time, they keep that money. Interest. So interest it's really just the cost of borrowing money over time, I would say. Ultimately, it's the lendee that actually has to pay this. So for example, if you're paying 10% interest on a $100,000 property, that's $10,000 per year you're paying on that. Now with a mortgage, it's completely different. Remember, they amortize it, so it's all certain calculation that you can do. You can just go to amortization.com, throw in a calculator, and see what an amortization chart usually looks like. Mortgage brokers. A mortgage broker is another third party that really plays as the middleman between the borrowee and the lender. So basically someone who's looking to buy a property, they want to get a loan on that. There is a middleman that goes in and actually connects you with a lender who's looking to lend money out. So that is the middleman looking to give you a loan on the property to help you out. Now, this is something more for realtors to use, but if you're selling your property, you want to know if your buyer has this, especially if you put the property on the market. And this is called a pre-approval letter. A pre-approval letter is basically a way for a potential seller to know if the buyer has been pre-vetted and they are basically approved for a certain amount of loan, showing that their income's fine and everything's good to go. It adds credibility to the buyer when they're looking to purchase a piece of real estate. PMI, or private mortgage insurance. When you take a mortgage out of less than 20%, you have to pay PMI. This is a private insurance that you have to pay to protect the bank with their asset and collateral they have on you. Until you reach about 20% equity, you still have to pay that. Next real estate lingo term here is refi, also known as refinancing. It's usually a way for a homeowner to restructure their loan. They sell the loan and they redo it. So maybe interest rates were 10% when I had it, and they went down to 7%. It'd be way cheaper to do that 7%. So you restructure that home loan with the new rate. There is some costs in between that. So basically the new lender is basically paying everything out, and then you have a note with that person. But basically it just gives you a cheaper rate. Next is title and title insurance. So title and title insurance, kind of like a car. When you're buying a piece of property, you want to make sure when you spend $100,000 on something, or 200, 300, and in the millions, you want to make sure that you're the rightful owner and there's no disputes on who owns that piece of property, right? So if you pay $100,000 to a homeless guy who says he'll sell you this house, you want to make sure that he was the proper owner, right? And you didn't get screwed out of hundreds of thousands of dollars. The way you do that is with title and title insurance. Basically in the closing process, it is usually required that you get title insurance. So title insurance just protects the buyer in case there's some crazy liens on the property or there's title disputes. Next here is due diligence period. A due diligence period, also due diligence, is a special period in between when someone goes into a contract to buy and sell a piece of real estate to really examine the property. During this period, a buyer may want to renegotiate or back out of a contract, and there's usually no repercussions for that. If they find something wrong with the property, let's say they put an inspector in there and the roof has a bad leak that they didn't know. Next here is contingencies. Contingencies are conditions that must be met in a transaction. So to really sum this up a little better, a seller or a buyer in a piece of real estate, before they actually sign a contract, they write in the contract, hey, this property is contingent on me getting financing for this if I'm actually gonna buy this piece of real estate. So for us real estate investors, it's important. So maybe if I try to sell my piece of property and someone says no, and someone gives me a contract for a really great price, but they say it's really contingent on approval of an inspection. So that means that the sale will go through and the contract's good to go if they bring an inspector in there and then they approve the roof or something like that. It's a condition that must be met before we go forward with anything. Proof of funds. Proof of funds is basically a statement from a financial institution verifying that a buyer has enough funds. So for us real estate wholesalers, we want to make sure that our cash buyers has the actual funds in their bank account to really buy our property. That's really how you can tell people that are actually serious about buying a piece of real estate and that aren't. All you gotta do is ask your cash buyer for a proof of funds. The MLS. The MLS is also called the Multiple Listing Service. This is basically a database that all licensed real estate agents use to list their properties on the market. It's also really good for buyers of real estate, buyers agents, to go into a piece of property to actually look up a database online. It's sort of like Zillow, but a lot more advanced. It's just every realtor can go in there and look at properties that are listed for sale. Another term a lot of real estate investors use is exit strategy. An exit strategy is a way for an investor to plan out how to cash out on a piece of property. So maybe they want to sell their house, maybe on the market, maybe they want to sell it with owner financing in place, or maybe they just want to rehab the property and put it on the market, or just rent it out. An appraisal is basically from an independent party that goes, looks at the property, looks around it, and gives their best guess of what the property is worth. Closing is basically a final meeting between a buyer and a seller of a piece of real estate, really to hone down and fill out the final pieces of paperwork, bring the funding to the table, and get the transaction done. Closing costs. So closing costs are the cost to actually sell a piece of real estate at a closing, like we said before. Usually closing costs are about 2 to 5%, and then an additional 6% if you are the seller of a piece of real estate to actually close on a piece of property. Now that includes title insurance, taxes, property fees, doc stamps. Comps or comparables is something us real estate investors and wholesalers love to use. Comparables is just a way for investors, agents, and other people to go and look at comparable properties that sold around the market. So the interesting thing about real estate is that every piece of real estate is extremely unique. That's why I love real estate so much. It's not like a stocks where every single stock's the same. It's one huge company split into millions and millions of shares. Every piece of real estate's different. So it's really hard to hone down on a price of real estate. Again, the price of real estate is just what someone's willing to sell it for. But it's interesting to see if something is a 3-bedroom, 2 bathrooms that is 1,000 square feet. Maybe you can look at other 3-bedroom, 2 bathrooms that are 1,000 square feet around that area, around that range that maybe have had similar features. Then you can see what that sold for. So maybe this one sold for $120 a square foot over there. 1/2 mile away sold for 150 a square foot. And then you kind of do your calculations there and see what you think the property is worth. An offer. An offer is the initial purchase price that we propose to a seller of a piece of real estate. So for wholesaling, that means we're trying to buy a property all cash by ourselves, then we are going to want to offer something at a discount to the seller and make a profit in between there. So what I would do is I would propose to someone looking to sell their property for cash, hey, Mrs. Johnson, hey, Sally Sue, how much would you need to sell this property for? Maybe they say they don't know. Maybe say, hey, would you be able to accept $50,000 if that's what I could give you today for the property? That is me offering something to the seller of a piece of real estate. Now, if you put a property on the market, has something like that, then you just do it with a realtor. The realtor would say, hey, my buyer is offering you $100,000 for this piece of real estate. One of the most important terms for a real estate investor is ROI, which is return on investment. So let's say I put $100,000 into my rental property here, and I want to know how much I get back. Maybe I get a 12% back. Let's say I put $100,000 into the property and I get $12,000 in rental payments, and then I get some appreciation, which is in there, and maybe overall I make 16-17%, so maybe about 17 grand of sales basically from that piece of real estate. Then I got to pay my taxes, insurance, I got to account for my vacancy, other issues with the property, maybe I got to replace the roof or something. Then overall, let's say I had to spend $7,000. So at the end of the day, I made $10,000 in pure net profit. I spent $100,000 on the property. That means I had a 10% ROI. I made $10,000 divided by the $100,000. I made 10% ROI on that piece of real estate. So as real estate investors, here's some other wholesaling terms you might want to know if you're interested in wholesaling real estate. Number one here is bandit signs. Bandit signs are those things right there. That's how I actually got started in real estate. That is an interesting way to actually market a piece of property. You stick those out in the ground and you just stick them in the ground and someone will call you on your personal number. Now, my phone number is still active. That was one of the first bandit signs I put out over 3.5 years ago. Made $100,000 in high school just putting those things out. That's my first batch of bandit signs. Those are the signs you just put in the ground. You get a call, you meet the seller, then boom, you get a deal. Cash buyers. A cash buyer is someone who is willing to buy a property for all cash. Most of the time, a cash buyer is someone looking to make money off of you. So they're looking to buy a property at a discount, but you get a property under contract for a discount. So you pass some savings on to them, but you make money too in the transaction. So cash buyers are willing to buy a property for all cash. So they're either looking to buy a property as maybe a rental, maybe they're looking to buy it and just actually flip the property on you. Either way, it's basically, they're just looking to buy a property for you all cash. So for example, I put a property under contract. I meet Sally here. I put it under contract for $100,000. I sell that contract. I assign that contract over to my cash buyer, Doug, and Doug's going to pay me $120,000 for the property. The sandwich in between, that's $20,000. I get a check for 20 grand. Maybe he rents the property out, or maybe he flips it, make 40 grand. But overall, I make $20,000 on that transaction. Boom, on to the next. A buyer's list or a cash buyer's list is basically a Rolodex or a huge list of all the cash buyers that I have that I can call on a whim's notice to sell my contract I have under contract. Motivated sellers. What is a motivated seller? A motivated seller is a seller of a piece of real estate that doesn't want to deal with a realtor. They just want to cash out on the property and just get rid of it. Sort of like a pawn shop, if you sort of look at it, or maybe a car dealership, you want to sell it with a car dealership. They don't want to deal with the hassle of working with a realtor. They want to sell the property really quickly. Hence why my bandit signs say cash really quickly, sell it really fast, really simple and easy. Usually the property has some issues with it. Maybe the roof has an issue, maybe the floor has water damage. You never really know, every piece of real estate's different. Or maybe there's an external influence with someone's life. They just want to get rid of a property cash. Sometimes people just want to get rid of a boat or a car. Same thing with a piece of real estate. Now we want to target those people and see if they're willing to sell the property with a discount for us, so we can go to a cash buyer and then make a profit in between that. A bird dog is basically a person out there that hunts out potential properties that are either distressed or there's a motivating factor in between that. So bird dogs might go in their car, driving around town and looking for properties that are distressed. They'll maybe make a list, send it to me, and maybe I'll go market for that list and call those people and see, hey, John, hey, are you interested in selling this piece of real estate? And if I get a deal, I'll pay that bird dog a percentage of that deal. And that's how they make their money. They truly just give leads to us real estate wholesalers. Assignment of contract. An assignment of contract is basically us selling that contract to a cash buyer. Again, for easy numbers, I put the property on a contract for $100,000. I sell it for $110,000. I will assign that contract. I'll just give that contract to the cash buyer in exchange for money. Here's another really interesting one. This is called a double close. A double close is just a way for us to buy a piece of real estate without really buying it, if that makes sense. Really called also back-to-back closings. So us real estate wholesalers, the reason why we want to do that is, let's say we put a property under contract for $100,000 and we sell that piece of real estate for $160,000. That means there's a $60,000 profit in that transaction. Whoa, that's a lot of money. I've done this before. What you don't want to happen is at the closing table, and the seller goes here, they look at the transaction, it says, I'm getting $100,000. It looks like Zach Ginn here is getting $60,000, and the final sale price is $160,000. Oh my gosh. No, I don't want to go through with this. You can have that situation. So what happens with a double closing is the actual seller doesn't know that you're making $60,000 on this transaction. The way it works is you, for an extremely brief period of time, you buy that property for $100,000 in one room, then you instantly go into another room, and then you sell that piece of property that you now own for a very short period of time to a cash buyer for $160,000. So there's two separate statements stating that you bought this property for $100,000, then you sold it for $160,000, and the seller will never know you made the $60,000. Sometimes in that short period of time, you have to pay a special fee, maybe for borrowing that $100,000 for that 1 hour of time. Again, there's fees with that. Maybe the buyer doesn't want to go through, you're still the owner of it. But overall, that is a double closing. Usually when you're making over $30,000 to $35,000 plus on a wholesale deal, that's when I want to do a double closing, just so there's no risk of a buyer backing out. Virtual wholesaling. Virtual wholesaling is basically a way for us real estate wholesalers to actually go and wholesale properties from our computer. How do I do this? So basically, in a really quick one, I got a million videos on this, guys, is, regular real estate is I physically go meet a person. I'll physically stick a sign like that out in the ground. A person will call me on my phone. I'll go physically meet them at the property, and I'll sign a physical contract with a pen. We'll sign that. Then I'll go meet a physical cash buyer. He'll go inside of the property. He'll say, hey, okay, we're good to go. Maybe I'll meet him at Starbucks. He signs that assignment of contract with us, and I make my 10, 20, 30, hopefully $1 million on that property. But there is a way for us to do this all on the computer. It's called virtual wholesaling. I got a million videos on it. But virtual wholesaling is basically a way for, maybe I'll use another marketing strategy. Maybe I'll cold call them. Maybe I'll actually send a piece of mail over to that person. Maybe I live here in Florida. Maybe I'll mail a flyer over to someone in Colorado. And I say, hey, I'm looking to buy some properties cash. Are you interested in selling your property here? Maybe he says, yes, I want to sell my piece of property in Colorado. Can you come meet me at Tuesday at 3 p.m.? And I might go say, well, I can't really go meet you at the property. Would it be okay if I kind of did this over the phone, or maybe you show me some pictures of the property? The way our company operates is we actually do everything hands off. I don't actually go meet you at the property. We get it done as quick and simple, as easy as possible. Maybe they'll ask you some questions, but usually most of the time they're okay with it if you're going to buy it for cash. What happens is you look at the properties, you get the condition from the seller, you bring someone that you know in that local area over there in Colorado. You can go inside, take pictures of the property, you look at the pictures, and then you call the seller maybe over Zoom or video chat, talk to them and say, hey, I saw the condition of the property, it looks really good. What price would you need to sell this property for? Maybe you negotiate and you both agree to sell it for maybe $100,000 over the phone or through a video chat. For $100,000, then what you do is you can virtually sign a contract either with DocuSign, maybe dotloop, where you can literally just have them click a button stating that, yes, I'm the person, click and sign the contract virtually. You can actually legally do this. Boom, you have a contract signed that is virtual. Now here comes the part where a lot of people ask, like, Zach, how do I find a cash buyer on that? What you do is you actually have a cash buyer that physically goes there. You'll usually just call that seller that you have and say, hey, my partner's gonna come by, look at the property. So they'll go inside the property, look at it, they'll give me the A-OK. Then I'll negotiate with that cash buyer, say maybe sell my $100,000 contract for $130,000. And I virtually do another DocuSign with a person, an assignment of contract. Then at the closing, which will probably be local there in Colorado, I'll get my $30,000 check mailed to me. I do a lot of virtual wholesaling, mostly do it in person, but I do virtual wholesaling in probably 5 states right now, and it's still really profitable. Cold calling. Cold calling is another marketing strategy that us real estate wholesalers love to use all the time. It's basically me going on the phone, literally calling a motivated seller without them knowing me, just completely out of the blue, using a script to see if they're interested in selling their direct mail. Direct mail are stuff like this. These little postcards right here. You go mail thousands of them to sellers, seeing if they're interested in selling their piece of real estate. It's a really good way to get deals. It's a little expensive. When you have a high budget, they're actually really worthwhile. Next is SMS text blasting. SMS text blasting is one of the newest and probably one of my favorite marketing strategies for real estate wholesaling. Again, this is basically me sending tens of thousands of texts every single month to people that have properties that they own with certain filters. Maybe they have a lot of equity in the property. Maybe they're going through a divorce. Maybe I can text them saying, hey, would you be interested in selling their property for cash? I can blast out texts like that, and usually you get really good deals doing that too. CRM is basically a database of all the leads that we have as a real estate wholesaling and real estate wholesaler to really manage our leads, call them, and kind of have a database because we can't memorize thousands of leads in our heads, unfortunately. I like to use Podium. RVM, or ringless voicemail. Ringless voicemail is a way for you to actually send messages straight into someone's voicemail, not even calling them. You can send thousands and thousands of blasts like that out. A really interesting and good strategy to do. Again, sometimes illegal in some states, like here in Florida, I can't do it, but in other states, you can definitely do it. Skip tracing. Skip tracing is really an investigator's term of just finding the whereabouts of someone. Us in real estate wholesaling, let's say our neighbor has this defunct property and they live in California and the thing's just completely decrepit. Maybe I want to find that person's phone number because they don't live in the property, they live over there in California. Maybe I want to give him a call and see if he's interested in selling that property. Maybe I can put that property on contract and then make some profit off of it. So skip tracing is a way for us to find that person's phone number. You can use a free service like truepeoplesearch.com. Search that address and then maybe a phone number pops up from there and you can call that phone number. Or maybe you have tens of thousands of leads you got and you want to do a huge list of those properties. You go like batchleads.com and then go skip trace with them. I mean, you can use any company. There's a bunch of companies out there that do skip tracing services, but it's just another interesting way to find someone's phone number. Probates. A probate is when someone unfortunately passes away, and that is the process of what happens when someone dies. So let's say, God forbid, a family member of you dies. Process of that person owning, let's say, a bunch of real estate. What happens to that? Who owns that piece of real estate now? Process of the courts to determine who gets it. Usually someone has a will saying, hey, my son, daughter gets it, and then you can go through that process. But during that process, you can go to the actual heirs and go contact them to see if they are interested in selling that property. It's a really good way to find good wholesale deals. Real estate contracts. Again, contract is the piece of paper that we use to go into a bilateral agreement, which is basically a mutual agreement. So you and me, I am going to be the buyer of a piece of real estate. You will be the seller of the piece of real estate. We sign something on a piece of paper, which is legally binding to state that I'm going to buy this property for $100,000. Now, there's certain terminology we can do. Again, there's a million videos on this where I can, in that piece of paper, stating that I'm legally have the first right to buy this piece of property for that specific price on the contract. What I can do is sell that contract, and if I want to get out, there is due diligence periods again where I can get out of that if I wanted to. ARV, or after repair value, that is the value of a piece of real estate maybe after it's all repaired and it's good to go. So what we do is we calculate how much the ARV is. So let's say a piece of property, if it's all fixed up, ready to go on the market, it's worth $200,000, and we know it needs $30,000 in repairs. So that means we can calculate from there what our offers would be. So after repair value is basically just the value of a piece of real estate after it's repaired on the market. Absentee owner. An absentee owner is a owner of a piece of real estate that doesn't live in the property. Usually they are landlords renting out a piece of real estate. Usually we want to go after those people because maybe if they don't live in the property, we can go after them and see if they're interested in selling that property. An addendum. An addendum is an attachment that we add on to a contract in real estate that states a change in that contract that I have to sign and also that the seller has to sign. Usually just modifies or changes the contract. Earnest money or earnest money deposit. That is the deposit we put in that original contract for a real estate transaction. So usually I recommend just doing $100 or maybe $50. Sometimes I've seen $10 on there. It just shows you're serious. And in some states you have to put a earnest money. You have to put some down payment onto a actual real estate contract. Don't worry, 50 to $100 is all you really need for it. And that might be non-refundable after a due diligence period. Inspection period is very similar to a due diligence period. Sometimes they're the same, sometimes they're not, depending on the contract. That is a period in between a real estate contract. Let's say I put $1,000 down with a motivated seller and I put $1,000 down payment, earnest money, and I have a 30-day inspection period. That means within the 30 days, I can inspect the property, and for whatever reason, if I want to get out of it, I can. Us real estate wholesalers, that's good. So maybe if I find cash buyers and I can't sell it, I can get out of it and keep my $1,000. Equity is the amount of money that the property is worth minus what's owed on it. So let's say, for example, a property is worth $100,000 and the seller has a $90,000 mortgage on it. That means they have $10,000 of equity, also known as 10% equity. So they have $10,000 of value over what the thing's worth is $100,000. So they have 10% equity. Maybe if they owe $40,000, that would also mean that 100 minus 40, they have $60,000 of value in the property. That means they have 60% equity, which would be considered a high amount of equity. So we want to go after people that have enough equity where they can sell the property, make some profit, and then also we can make profit in between the wholesale transaction. Eviction. An eviction is a legal process of kicking a tenant out of a piece of real estate and property. A HUD-1 statement, basically an itemized list of the costs of buying and selling a piece of real estate. So a buyer would have their itemized costs and they'll say, hey, the buyer is going to owe $127,000 and then the seller is going to receive $120,000. That's $7,000 of just closing costs and other expenses on the property to close and actually sell. FHA loan. An FHA loan is a loan that is backed by the Federal Housing Administration. It's a loan to protect first-time home buyers if they meet certain criteria. If their credit's good enough. If it's not, usually they can pay as little as 3.5% for a down payment. It's very attractive. Most loans never do that. The cool part on that one, a lot of people want to sell their piece of real estate and they can do it if someone buys it with an FHA loan. It's an easy way for people to get loans that have not bought a piece of property before that the government will back for you if you have a certain credit score and other income factors. For us real estate investors, if we're flipping a piece of property, maybe we're wholesaling it. So us wholesalers don't really deal with it, but if I wholesale it, if I buy the property and then put it back on the market, I can't sell that to a buyer who's getting an FHA loan for 90 days. So you got to keep that in mind as a real estate flipper. Wholesaling. Wholesaling is like wholesaling. I state it all the time because it's like flipping a piece of property, but you're really kind of wholesaling at the same time. So a wholesale is when you only put about $3,000 or less into a piece of real estate when flipping it. So this is what I do. You see me in all my vlogs, I do this. So maybe I'll buy a piece of property for $100,000. What I'll do is I'll spend $3,000 in repairs. So that same property, for example, if I bought it for $100,000 and I put it under contract for $60,000, maybe I could sell that to a cash buyer for $85,000, maybe $25,000 in profit. But what if I close on the piece of property? So I put a property under contract for that $100,000. What I could do is I could sell that for $125,000 and make $25,000 in profit in a wholesale deal, which is amazing, right? But guess what? What if I actually bought that piece of property, I put $3,000 in repairs, and I put it on the market with a lot of buyers going through the property, and then maybe I'll make $40,000 because I get a better class of cash buyer Remember, in real estate, classic cash buyer that you have. Top tier, you got the people looking to live in the property, which is actually who we're selling it in a wholesale versus someone trying to make a buck off of me, which is through wholesale. Those people are looking for rentals and flips. People I'm selling to in a wholesale, they're actually looking to live in the property, and we only pay $3,000 usually max for it to be called a wholesale. It's a wholesale that sells for retail. FSBO, also called a for sale by owner. This is a person who's looking to sell their real estate without a realtor. They usually don't want to deal with wholesalers either. They want top dollar, but they don't want to pay a 6% real estate commission on their piece of real estate. Usually they're just listed on Zillow and it's a complete mess. But sometimes people can sell it without a realtor and without a wholesaler. They can find an end buyer by themselves, trying to list it by themselves and saving that 6% commission. Hard money loan. A hard money loan is basically a loan on a piece of real estate that is private without a bank. Usually me, wholesaler, maybe I want to go flip a property and put a full flip in it. Me as a wholesaler, I might not have the money to get approval on a bank loan. So I have a private lender who will charge me a really high amount of interest. But if the property is bought at a good rate, a private lender will give it to me. They'll know I make good profit on it. They do the analysis themselves and we're good to go. I can get money to actually buy that piece of real estate, flip it and make a profit, and I gotta pay extra interest. But overall, I'll make more money sometimes if I then wholesaling. Underwriting. Underwriting is the process of an individual, sometimes a private lender or institution of a bank, to assess the risk of you defaulting on a piece of real estate. So maybe if I have a really low credit score and I'm looking to actually just be a tenant on a piece of real estate, sometimes someone through underwriting will say, this guy's not approved, he has a criminal record, he doesn't have a stable job, and his income's all over the place, and he's been evicted plenty of times. They'll consider me high risk, and I wouldn't be able to get a loan maybe to buy a piece of real estate or actually become a tenant. Basically, underwriting just assesses the financial loss or risk of giving a person a loan or maybe having them as a tenant. A lease is a long-term contract between a landlord and a tenant to actually rent out a property for a specific period of time for a certain price point. Usually they're about a year, stating, hey, for an entire year, we both agree that I'll give you this down payment and you'll pay about $1,000 per month in rent. A lien is a claim on a piece of property for a certain amount of money that the person that is receiving the lien is in debt to that person for that amount of money. So if they sell, let's say for a piece of real estate, I own it for $100,000 and someone put a $5,000 lien on it because I signed something. Maybe a lot of people who don't pay their child support, they get a lien on their property because they don't pay it they get a court order to put a lien on the property. So if I had a kid and I had to pay child support and I never paid it, again, I don't have kids, but if I stop paying and I owe $5,000 in child support, then that person could go to the court and put a lien on my property, stating that if I sell the property, that person gets $5,000. Basically, charges or claims of debt with collateral on something. So maybe BRRRR. BRRRR is buy, rehab, rent, and refinance, repeat. It's basically an acronym for buying a piece of real estate, rehabbing it, renting it, refinancing, getting out of it, and then repeat from there. I'm not really the BRRRR expert, but you can look up other people who do it. It's a good way to make money, but there's also other really good ways to get a good ROI. Driving $4. Driving $4 is another marketing strategy that we use when we go in our car, we drive around town, and we look for properties that are distressed. Now, when a property is distressed, that means usually the person who owns it doesn't have enough money or they don't care enough about the property to actually fix it up. That's really good for us. That means we can go after that person and see if they're interested in selling it for cash, and then we can get a property at a discount, sell it to a cash buyer, and make a profit in between there. It's called driving for dollars. We drive around looking for distressed properties. We can use an app for that, or we can just write the property address down, go there, skip trace that address, and then call them and see if they're interested in selling it. All right, guys, I hope you enjoyed this video today. That is some of the real estate lingo and terms. Maybe you can understand some of the language real estate investors say, so maybe a lot of words don't go over your head. It's a really good introduction. There's a million other terms you're gonna have to learn in real estate investing, but maybe this little crash course can help you a little bit into your journey into starting out in real estate investing. Thank you guys so much. Please like and subscribe to this video if you liked it. Thank you guys so much. See you next week.